Welcome to Southwest Desert, where adventure meets the arid beauty of the American Southwest. Join us as we explore the rugged landscapes, uncover hidden historical gems, and dive deep into the rich legends and culture of this iconic region. Subscribe now and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out on the latest desert adventures. Please leave a like or comment. This is very helpful. Let's journey together into the heart of the Southwest Desert. Imagine traveling from Missouri to California in 1858. No railways span the continent. No highways connect east to west. Just 2,700 miles of rugged terrain standing between you and your destination. Today, on Southwest Desert, we tell the story of how one man's vision connected a divided nation and forever changed how Americans understood their vast country. In the fall of 1858, a 23-year-old New York Herald reporter named Waterman Ormsby sat nervously in St. Louis, about to embark on what he called a historical event, the first transcontinental mail run across the United States. Recently married with a 9-month-old son at home, Ormsby was the only through passenger on the inaugural westbound Butterfield Overland Mail stagecoach. What awaited him was a grueling 24-day journey across deserts, mountains, and plains that would test the limits of human endurance. But more than a test of will, this journey represented the dawn of a new era in American connectivity. One that began with a humble stagecoach driver who rose to prominence through sheer determination and organizational brilliance. John Butterfield was born in 1801 in Berne, New York, with limited formal education. His professional life began as a simple stage driver, but what he lacked in schooling, he made up for with an innate understanding of transportation logistics. From those modest beginnings driving horses, he quickly advanced through the ranks, eventually controlling multiple stage lines throughout New York State. His exceptional organizational skills caught the attention of transportation pioneers Henry Wells and William G. Fargo. By 1850, Butterfield had ascended to the vice presidency of the newly formed American Express Company, which he co-founded with Wells and Fargo. But his most significant contribution to American history was yet to come, and it would be made possible by his close friendship with President James Buchanan. On March 3, 1857, Congress passed a post office appropriation bill that would change American history. Section 13 authorized the creation of a transcontinental mail delivery service, an unprecedented undertaking in an age before railroads connected the coasts. The contract specifications were daunting: semi-weekly mail service between St. Louis and San Francisco, with an annual payment of $600,000. The contract would last 6 years, but the selected company needed to commence service within 1 year of signing. When John Butterfield signed the contract on September 16, 1857, he faced an almost impossible task: establishing stations, procuring coaches and animals, hiring personnel, and mapping a route across 2,700 miles of often hostile terrain, all within 12 months. Before a single station could be built, a fundamental question needed answering: which route would the overland mail take? This wasn't merely a logistical question. It was deeply political. Northern states advocated for a northern route. Southern states pushed for a southern pathway, and central route proponents made their case as well. The debate reflected the growing sectional tensions that would eventually erupt into civil war. Postmaster General Aaron Brown, a Tennessean, ultimately selected what became known as the 32nd Parallel Route, a southern pathway through Arkansas, Texas, New Mexico Territory, and into California near Fort Yuma. The eastern end featured terminals in both St. Louis and Memphis that converged at Fort Smith, Arkansas. Critics were numerous. Many considered the logistics impossible. The distance between water sources, hostile territory, and supply chain difficulties all presented formidable challenges. Some feared the longest stagecoach route in the world, was simply too unwieldy to succeed. But John Butterfield was undeterred. The route would stretch over 2,700 miles through diverse and treacherous terrain. From the eastern terminals at St. Louis and Memphis, it would connect to Fort Smith, a critical junction where the routes converged. From there, it continued through Indian Territory, crossing into Texas at Colbert's Ferry. The Texas segment presented vast plains, the intimidating Llano Estacado or Staked Plains, and remote stretches of western Texas leading to Franklin, opposite El Paso. After Texas came the New Mexico Territory, followed by a strategic dip into Mexican territory near the New River. Upon entering California near Fort Yuma, the route ascended through mountain passages past Warner's Ranch in Los Angeles, continued through the San Joaquin Valley, crossed Pacheco Pass, and finally reached San Francisco. Each segment required carefully placed stations, typically 15 to 25 miles apart. These stations weren't merely waypoints. They were lifelines providing fresh horses, food, and shelter in some of America's most inhospitable regions. The greatest testimony to Butterfield's organizational genius was that, within 1 year of contract signing, this entire infrastructure was operational: 141 stations, hundreds of employees, and a fleet of stagecoaches and animals were ready to make history. On September 15, 1858, the first eastbound mail departed San Francisco. The following day, the westbound mail left St. Louis with our journalist, Waterman Ormsby, aboard. This one-day offset created historical confusion, with many initially believing the departures were simultaneous. It wasn't until September 28th, when the coaches met at Guadalupe Canyon, that the offset became clear. Ormsby's account, published as 8 comprehensive articles in the New York Herald, provides an unparalleled window into this historical moment. As the only through passenger on the inaugural westbound stage, he documented everything, even privileged conversations with John Butterfield himself, who traveled alongside him for a significant portion of the journey. The Butterfield Overland Mail is an accomplished fact, Ormsby wrote. The route has been traveled in the extraordinary time of 23 days and 23 hours, and passengers and mail matter have been conveyed in absolute safety across a region hitherto considered impassable. Despite the journey's fatigue, Ormsby's writing conveyed genuine enthusiasm for the Overland Mail's future and an explicit recognition that he was witnessing a pivotal moment in American transportation history. After completing the westbound journey, he returned to New York via steamer, a telling contrast between the new overland route and the established sea passage. For 2.5 years, from 1858 to 1861, the Butterfield Overland Mail maintained remarkably reliable service. Coaches departed on schedule, mail arrived with unprecedented speed, and the impossible had become routine. The operation required constant vigilance, adapting to extreme weather, managing security incidents, and implementing technical innovations. The line employed hundreds of station agents, drivers, stock tenders, and other personnel, all working in coordination across nearly 3,000 miles. The company's financial structure evolved significantly during this period. By March 1860, concerns about Butterfield's financial management led to Wells Fargo gaining greater control over the company. Butterfield was eventually removed from the presidency due to mounting indebtedness, and a more cost-conscious president was installed. Despite these internal changes, the service continued to operate efficiently. Mail volume grew, delivery times improved, and the once impossible connection between East and West had become a reliable reality. But external forces would soon disrupt this achievement. As sectional tensions erupted into civil war in 1861, the southern route became increasingly problematic. Much of the line now ran through Confederate territory, creating serious security concerns for Union mail. The Butterfield Overland Mail was formally directed to abandon its southern route and shift operations northward to a more central east-west path. This massive transition required developing new infrastructure, redeploying personnel, and transferring equipment, all while maintaining service. The legacy of the original southern route would live on in the settlements that grew around its stations and the thoroughfares that followed its path. But the Butterfield name would gradually fade from the overland mail service. The final chapter of the Butterfield Overland Mail story came on November 1, 1866, when the Salt Lake City line was incorporated into Wells Fargo's operations. This marked the complete absorption of the overland stagecoaching network into Wells Fargo's expanding transportation empire. Operations west of the Missouri River were standardized under Wells Fargo management, with branding transitions and business model evolutions following. Yet even as the Butterfield name receded from public awareness, the company's enduring legacy was secured. The routes it pioneered became established thoroughfares, many of its stations evolved into permanent settlements, and its operational standards set benchmarks for transcontinental service reliability. Waterman Ormsby lived until 1908, passing away at 73 years old. His family legacy continued through his surviving spouse, daughter, and 2 sons who became Supreme Court stenographers. But his greatest contribution remains his first-hand documentation of that first transcontinental mail journey, recognized by historians as an important contribution to the annals of transportation. John Butterfield's humble beginning as a stage driver could hardly have predicted his central role in connecting a continent. His vision, organizational prowess, and determination created what many considered impossible, a reliable overland connection spanning America's vast expanses. The Butterfield Overland Mail Company operated for just 2.5 years on its original southern route, but its impact resonates through American history. It demonstrated that East and West could be reliably connected overland, years before the transcontinental railroad would make the journey commonplace. In an age of instant communication, it's difficult to imagine the marvel that was a 24-day mail delivery across the continent. But for Americans in 1858, the Butterfield Overland Mail didn't just deliver correspondence. It delivered the promise that their expanding nation, despite its vast distances, could remain united by the regular exchange of news, commerce, and personal connection. In September of 1821, as autumn leaves began to turn along the Mississippi River, a group of bold merchants loaded $12,000 worth of trade goods, equivalent to over $315,000 today, onto a massive 65-foot keelboat. They were about to embark on a journey that would help forge one of America's most important commercial arteries, though history would soon nearly forget their names. While most history books credit William Becknell as the father of the Santa Fe Trail, it was actually the Mcnite James expedition that departed just days before him, blazing a parallel path through uncharted territory toward the promise of untold riches in the newly independent territory of Mexico. Welcome to Southwest Desert. Today, we're uncovering the true story of the first Santa Fe Trail expedition, a tale of brotherhood, imprisonment, daring river navigation, and a fateful discovery that would transform America's western expansion. The expedition that left St. Louis on September 1, 1821, was no ordinary trading venture. For John Mcnite, a well-established St. Louis merchant, this journey was deeply personal. His brother Robert had been imprisoned in Spanish territory for 9 long years after an ill-fated 1812 trading mission. With news that Mexico had just declared independence from Spain, Mcnite saw his chance to free his brother while potentially opening lucrative new trade routes. Joining Mcnite was Thomas James, an experienced trader who would later chronicle their journey, his brother John James, and 6 additional men who would serve as handlers, guards, and laborers. Together, they formed a determined party with $12,000 in trade goods, an enormous sum for the time, and dreams of commercial success in the newly accessible Mexican territories. What made their journey particularly significant was its timing. Mexico had just gained independence from Spain, and the borders that had long been closed to American traders were beginning to crack open. The Mcnite James party was positioning themselves to be among the first to capitalize on this historic opportunity. Unlike William Becknell, who would depart Missouri shortly after them and take a direct overland route, the Mcnite James expedition chose a different strategy. They loaded their considerable cargo onto a massive keelboat and embarked down the Mississippi River, planning to turn west at the Arkansas River and navigate as far inland as possible before transitioning to land. The keelboat itself was a marvel of frontier engineering, roughly 65 feet long and 15 feet wide, with enough capacity to carry their entire inventory of trade goods. Navigation was brutally physical work. When the wind wasn't cooperative for sailing, the men employed 2 primary methods of propulsion: cordelling and poling. Cordelling required men to walk along the shoreline, pulling the massive vessel with ropes attached to its mast. The ropes ran through a system of rings to maintain proper angles as the men laboriously dragged the boat upstream. This back-breaking work was often complicated by rough terrain, dense vegetation, and unstable riverbanks. When the shores were too treacherous for cordeling, the crew turned to poling. Men would position themselves along the sides of the boat with long wooden poles, plant them firmly against the river bottom, and walk from bow to stern, pushing the boat forward before returning to the bow to repeat the process. Under optimal conditions, they might make 15 miles in a day, but challenging waters could reduce their progress to a crawl. The expedition traveled down the Mississippi for approximately 600 miles before turning westward onto the Arkansas River near present-day Arkansas City. Their progress was measured, deliberate, and exhausting, a stark contrast to Becknell's faster but more dangerous direct overland approach. By the fall of 1821, the expedition had navigated roughly 25 miles west of the Cimarron River's mouth, near what is now Hominy, Oklahoma. Here, they faced a critical decision. The river had become too shallow to continue, forcing a dramatic change in transportation strategy. The party split temporarily. 2 men remained with the valuable cargo while the others journeyed approximately 75 to 100 miles to an Osage village near present-day Claremore, Oklahoma. There, through careful negotiation and diplomatic interaction with the Osage tribe, they acquired 23 horses, enough to transport their considerable inventory overland. With their newly acquired horses, the expedition carefully redistributed their cargo, prioritizing the most valuable and necessary items. Some goods may have been cached or left behind, though records don't specify exactly what sacrifices were made. The party then began the challenging task of navigating without established trails through western Oklahoma, across the Texas Panhandle, and finally into New Mexico territory. According to Thomas James's later account, they arrived in Santa Fe on December 1, 1821, though historical records suggest William Becknell's party had arrived 2 weeks earlier. Curiously, neither expedition mentions encountering the other, creating an enduring historical mystery. Were their routes different enough to prevent meeting? Did memories fade over time, leading to discrepancies in the written record? With limited primary sources, these questions remain unanswered. When the Mcnite James party arrived in Santa Fe, they found a community at the cusp of transformation. The territory had just gained independence from Spain as part of Mexico, and the political climate was rapidly evolving. For American traders, this represented unprecedented opportunity, though not without challenges. The expedition divided its efforts upon arrival. The James brothers established a trading location in Santa Fe, displaying their merchandise and developing pricing strategies for a market that was eager for American goods but hampered by currency scarcity. Meanwhile, John Mcnite made financial arrangements with Thomas James and embarked southward on a mission to find his imprisoned brother. The journey to Durango, deep in northern Mexico, took approximately 4 to 5 months round trip. There, he finally located Robert Mcnite, who had endured 9 years of imprisonment following his 1812 trading attempt. The brothers returned to Santa Fe in April 1822, marking a poignant personal triumph amid mixed commercial results. Back in Santa Fe, the expedition faced economic reality. While there was demand for their goods, actual currency was in short supply throughout the newly independent territory. After assessing the market conditions, the party made strategic decisions about their inventory. They sold their remaining goods to a Spanish merchant for $1,000 in cash, plus a substantial number of horses and mules, essential for their return journey and valuable commodities in Missouri. By early June 1822, the expedition was ready to return east. Their party had grown to include Hugh Glenn, who had arrived in the West with Jacob Fowler, a seasoned plainsman in his late 50s. Together, they managed a substantial herd of 140 horses and mules, with 83 belonging to the Mcnite James party, a considerable increase in wealth from their departure. On June 13, 1822, they encountered another westbound expedition led by Benjamin Cooper from Franklin, Missouri. Cooper's party included his nephews Braxton and Stephen Cooper, Joel Walker, and 10 additional men, carrying $4,000 to $5,000 in trade goods. This chance meeting provided valuable opportunity for information exchange. The eastbound party shared details about trail conditions, Native American activity, and Santa Fe market information, while the westbound party carried messages back to Missouri. The return journey was not without incident. Along the Osage Trail near the Neosho River, the party lost 38 animals to theft by members of the Osage tribe. This significant loss forced another strategic division of the expedition. Mcnite, James, and several others constructed or acquired canoes and pirogues for water travel. They navigated the Osage River to the Missouri River and finally reached St. Louis by mid-July 1822. The remaining party members continued overland with the surviving animals, arriving sometime later. Perhaps the most significant moment of the return journey came on June 28, 1822, when the Glenn Fowler portion of the party made an astonishing discovery. Taking a circuitous route to avoid potential Native American conflicts, they came upon something unprecedented in present-day Franklin County, Kansas: wagon tracks. The discovery initially provoked disbelief. The tracks clearly showed the width, depth, and distinctive pattern of wagon wheels, yet no one had previously attempted to bring wagons through this territory. The party followed the mysterious tracks for approximately 2 days before losing the trail and continuing their journey eastward. What they had stumbled upon, though they couldn't fully appreciate its significance at the time, were the tracks from William Becknell's second expedition to Santa Fe. Unlike his first journey or the Mcnite James expedition, Becknell had boldly brought wagons on his return trip, a decision that would revolutionize the Santa Fe trade. Jacob Fowler's journal entry from the day marks one of the most understated yet pivotal moments in Western expansion. wagon tracks where none should exist, pointing toward a future where heavy goods could move efficiently across the continent. The combined impact of these nearly simultaneous expeditions, Mcnite James, Becknell, and Cooper, cannot be overstated. Each contributed unique elements to what would become the Santa Fe Trail, a commercial artery that would transform America's western territories. Join my Patreon community and discover my art print products on my website in the links provided in my description and link above. Also, if you would like a particular image from my videos, give the timestamp for image, and I will upload it to my website and Patreon. Long before European explorers set foot in North America, a network of indigenous pathways crisscrossed the continent. These ancient trails would eventually form the foundation of what became known as the Old Spanish Trail. Spanish explorers and traders were drawn northward by whispers of a legendary kingdom, a place called Tiguayo, where entire civilizations were said to have originated, with a capital city so vast it would take 8 days to walk around its perimeter. This is the story of how myth and reality intertwined to create one of the most important trade routes in the American Southwest. The origins of the Old Spanish Trail are historically obscure, but the first documented use came when Utah guides led Spanish colonists northwest from Santa Fe, beyond Abiquiu through the Utah Canyonlands, to the vicinity of the Great Salt Lake. These indigenous pathways formed the infrastructure upon which Spanish colonial ambitions would build. Spain's interest in North America developed rapidly in the 16th century. Just 48 years after Columbus's first voyage, Francisco Vázquez de Coronado led an expedition to present-day Albuquerque in 1540. This expedition traversed much of the interior continent, reaching as far as the Great Plains of central Kansas. Simultaneously, Hernando de Soto explored the southeastern United States from 1539 to 1543, while Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo sailed along the California coastline from La Paz to Oregon's Rogue River from 1542 to 1543. In a relatively short span, Spanish explorers had covered an astonishing amount of the North American continent. The road to Santa Fe, founded in 1610, began with Caribbean explorations and extended through expeditions to Florida, the Yucatan, and the Gulf of Mexico. In 1519, Alonso de Pineda conducted a reconnaissance of the entire Gulf Coast from Yucatan to Florida, documenting major river mouths including the Rio Panuco, Rio Grande, and Mississippi. Early cartography played a crucial role in Spanish exploration, with Alonso de Santa Cruz's 1544 map being the first to show the interior of North America south of the Appalachians. Cartography continued to develop, with Abraham Ortelius's hemispheric map of the Americas in 1577 being the first to publicize the approximate location of New Mexico. However, it contained errors regarding the placement of the Rio Grande and mislocated several important settlements. Central to Spanish exploration of the Southwest was the concept of Tiguayo. The origins of this mythical place were associated with Aztec legends, connected to legendary place names like Copala, Sierra Azul, and Siete Cuevas, 7 caves. Tiguayo was believed to be the ancestral homeland where American Indians originated, specifically from 7 caves near the Lake of Copala, later associated with Gran Tiguayo. This legendary kingdom was said to be located northwest of New Mexico. The first explicit connection between Tiguayo and the Ute people came in 1686 with Fray Alonso de Posada's report. He stated that beyond the Hopi Pueblos, one arrives at the nation called Utahs, which was formerly called Tiguayo. There were indications of even earlier contact through a Captain Quima. Father Zarate Salmeron advised that the route to the northwest should go by way of the Rio Chama. Posada also reported that Oñate might have met men from the Tiguayo kingdoms, though there was confusion between Tiguayo and Gran Quivira. Posada clarified that Gran Quivira was to the east, while Tiguayo was to the north. Posada provided specific geographical directions to Tiguayo. From Santa Fe, one should travel a straight line to the northwest, cross the sierras called Casafuerte or Nabahu, cross the large river running directly west, enter the Utah Nation, described as a warlike people, and beyond them, enter the land called Tiguayo. The cultural significance of Tiguayo was profound, as it was associated with origin stories. Mexican Indians called it Copala by old tradition, and believed it to be the origin point not just for themselves, but for people from Guatemala, Peru, and neighboring kingdoms. This persistent legend was embraced even by Spanish officials. Franciscan missionaries also showed interest in Tiguayo. In 1744, Fray Carlos Delgado proposed to work among the Hopi, Navajo, and people of Gran Tiguayo. Based on information from Navajos, he described Tiguayo as lying about 200 leagues from New Mexico, composed of various nations, with one city so large it would take 8 days to walk around, ruled by a king of much dignity and ostentation. However, this proposal was never fulfilled. Official expeditions to Utah country began in 1765 with Juan Maria Antonio Rivera leading the first government-sanctioned journey. His small party, guided by Utes, traveled from Santa Fe to Abiquiu and beyond to the Dolores River, eventually reaching the Gunnison and Colorado rivers. Rivera's expedition created interest in what lay beyond Utah country. The most significant expedition came in 1776 with the journey of 2 Franciscan priests, Francisco Atanasio Dominguez and Francisco Silvestre Vélez de Escalante. Their objective was to establish a route between Santa Fe and Monterey, California. Although they failed to reach the Pacific coast due to harsh weather, they successfully provided detailed information about the land. The expedition's cartographer, Bernardo de Miera y Pacheco, created important maps that influenced future exploration. Escalante's conclusion about Tiguayo demystified the legend. He determined it was simply the land through which various Indian groups had migrated, evidenced by ruins with similar form to New Mexican pueblos and similar pottery fragments. This assessment effectively transformed Tiguayo from a mythical kingdom to a historical migration route. The impact of Escalante and Miera y Pacheco's cartographic work was significant. It defined the northern extent of Utah country, with the southern border at the Grand Canyon and the western extent lined by mountains of the Great Basin. Their work influenced subsequent colonial cartographers, including Nicolás Lafora, 1771, Antonio de Alzate, 1768, and Manuel Mascaro, 1779, all of whom relied on knowledge from the Rivera and Dominguez Escalante expeditions. The Old Spanish Trail developed naturally through trade, with Spanish traders teaching each other about Utah country and different routes to rendezvous points. Multiple variations of the trail emerged, but by the 1830s, an established route ran from Abiquiu through Tierra Amarilla to the Rio San Juan, near present-day Kanab north of the Grand Canyon, to an oasis at Las Vegas, and westward to Los Angeles. Many variants led to Utah country, but one primary variant led to California. The historical legacy of the Old Spanish Trail connected the mythical Tiguayo and historical New Mexico, providing a geographic stage for a rich historical pageant. The trail was driven by Hispanic desire for trade in the Great Basin and persisted despite official Spanish policy prohibiting travel to Utah country. Clandestine trade continued from the 1670s to the 1850s. By 1850, the term Tiguayo was largely forgotten, replaced by more accurate geographical knowledge. Today, the Old Spanish Trail stands as a testament to how myths and legends can shape historical developments. What began as a search for a legendary kingdom resulted in the exploration and mapping of vast territories and the establishment of vital trade networks. The trail represents the intersection of indigenous knowledge, European ambition, and the power of mythology to drive human exploration. Though Tiguayo may never have existed as Spaniards imagined it, their pursuit of this mythical kingdom left an indelible mark on the landscape and history of the American Southwest. In the shadow of the towering Guadalupe Mountains, where the endless Texas sky meets rugged limestone peaks, a story of courage, determination, and American expansion unfolds. The year is 1858. The California gold rush is in full swing, and a nation divided by growing tension seeks connection across a vast continent. Before the Transcontinental Railroad, before the telegraph line stretched from coast to coast, there was the Butterfield Overland Mail, a lifeline of communication spanning 2,800 miles from St. Louis to San Francisco, crossing some of the most treacherous terrain in North America. And nowhere was the journey more perilous than through the forbidding Guadalupe Mountains of West Texas. Welcome to Southwest Desert, the channel that explores the hidden histories carved into the American landscape. Today, we journey along the Butterfield Stage route through the Guadalupe Mountains, where bandits lurked, Apache warriors watched from hidden vantage points, and stagecoach drivers pushed themselves and their teams to the limits of human and equine endurance. This is not just a story about mail delivery. This is a tale of America's westward ambition, the clash of cultures and the individuals who risked everything to connect a growing nation. The Butterfield Overland Mail Company began operations in September 1858, fulfilling a government contract to establish regular mail service between the eastern United States and the booming settlements of California. John Butterfield, a transportation entrepreneur from New York, secured the lucrative contract worth $600,000 annually, approximately $19 million in today's currency. The route stretched across the southern United States, a strategic choice to avoid the harsh winter conditions that had proven deadly on more northern paths. From St. Louis and Memphis, the southern route converged at Fort Smith, Arkansas, before continuing through Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and into California. The entire journey took approximately 25 days, a remarkable achievement for the time, though modern travelers might balk at spending nearly a month in constant transit. Within this expansive route, the segment through the Guadalupe Mountains presented some of the most formidable challenges. Rising dramatically from the Chihuahuan desert floor, the Guadalupe Mountains form an imposing limestone reef, the fossilized remains of an ancient sea that covered this region 250 million years ago. Today, Guadalupe Peak stands as the highest point in Texas at 8,751 feet, a silent sentinel watching over the desert below. For Butterfield stagecoaches, this terrain meant navigating narrow mountain passes, steep inclines, and treacherous descents. The stark beauty of the landscape belied its dangers. Water was scarce, temperatures fluctuated dramatically, and the isolation made travelers vulnerable to attack. The stagecoach itself was an engineering marvel of its time. The Concord coach, manufactured by Abbott Downing Company in Concord, New Hampshire, was specifically designed for rough terrain. These coaches featured a unique suspension system using leather thorough braces, essentially leather straps that allowed the coach body to swing rather than bounce over rough terrain. This design gave rise to the term stagecoach swing, describing the swaying motion passengers experience throughout their journey. Each coach carried up to 9 passengers inside on 3 bench seats, with additional passengers sometimes perched on the roof. The cramped quarters forced strangers into intimate proximity for days on end, creating a unique social environment where class distinctions often dissolved in the face of shared hardship. Life aboard the Butterfield stage was anything but comfortable. Passengers paid approximately $200 for a one-way ticket, equivalent to about $6,000 today, for the privilege of enduring conditions that tested human resilience. The coaches traveled continuously, day and night, stopping only to change horses at stations spaced roughly 20 miles apart. Sleep came fitfully, if at all, as passengers attempted to rest while being jostled over rutted trails. One journalist who made the journey wrote that passengers were jerked, tossed, slammed, bumped, and shaken, until their heads seemed ready to snap off. Meals were hasty affairs at station houses, where travelers had just minutes to consume whatever food was available before the coach departed again. The standard Butterfield schedule allowed no time for leisure or sightseeing. The Guadalupe Mountains segment featured several crucial stage stations. The Pinery Station, situated at the base of Guadalupe Pass, served as an essential waypoint. Here, fresh horses were hitched to coaches, and passengers could briefly stretch their legs while station employees worked with practiced efficiency to prepare the stage for the next grueling section of trail. Archaeological excavations at the Pinery Station ruins have revealed a surprisingly complex operation. The station consisted of a main building constructed of limestone, corrals for horses and mules, blacksmith facilities, and living quarters for employees. These stations were not merely pit stops but frontier outposts of civilization, each maintaining a small community of workers dedicated to keeping the mail moving westward. The men who operated these stations lived isolated lives, constantly vigilant against attack from hostile forces and the unforgiving environment itself. Station keepers typically managed a staff including hostlers who cared for the horses, blacksmiths who repaired equipment, and cooks who prepared meals for employees and passengers. Many were former soldiers, adventurers, or those seeking escape from more settled regions. Beyond the physical hardships of the journey, travelers faced the omnipresent threat of human conflict. The Butterfield route cut through territories long inhabited by indigenous peoples, particularly various Apache bands who viewed the stagecoaches as intrusions into their ancestral lands. The company established its route just a few years after the United States had acquired much of the Southwest through the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo and the Gadsden Purchase. But these diplomatic arrangements with Mexico meant little to the Apache, who had never consented to either nation's claims. For the Apache, the Guadalupe Mountains held profound significance. The range provided not only tactical advantages for observing vast stretches of surrounding desert, but also spiritual importance. Apache oral traditions speak of the mountains as sacred places where deities dwelled and where ceremonial knowledge was revealed to their people. The intrusion of stagecoaches, with their noise, pollution, and the further encroachment they represented, constituted both a physical and spiritual violation. Attacks on coaches and stations occurred regularly, though historical records from this period often reflect the biased perspectives of European American sources. What settlers described as unprovoked raids were frequently understood by indigenous peoples as justified resistance against trespassers or retaliation for specific grievances. The complex dynamics of these intercultural conflicts cannot be reduced to simple narratives of heroes and villains. In addition to indigenous resistance, travelers faced threats from bandits who recognized the vulnerable stages as lucrative targets. Robberies were common enough that many passengers concealed valuables in secret compartments or false-bottomed luggage. The isolation of the route meant that help could be days away, and justice often came through extrajudicial means when it came at all. Despite these dangers, the Butterfield Overland Mail maintained a remarkable record of reliability. During its nearly 3 years of operation along the southern route, the company rarely failed to deliver the mail, although schedules sometimes suffered delays. This consistency proved crucial for connecting California to the rest of the nation during a period of national expansion and increasing sectional tensions. The success of the Butterfield stage was ultimately short-lived. By 1861, the outbreak of the Civil War made the southern route untenable as Confederate forces seized control of key territories. The service shifted northward, and technological advances soon rendered the stagecoach obsolete. The completion of the transcontinental telegraph in October 1861 meant that messages could be transmitted almost instantly across the continent. 10 years later, the Transcontinental Railroad connected the coast with a much faster and more comfortable mode of transportation. Yet the legacy of the Butterfield Overland Mail endures in the physical remains of its infrastructure and in its contribution to American connectivity. The company employed over 800 people and maintained approximately 250 stations across its entire route. It represented one of the largest business operations in the country at that time and demonstrated the nation's commitment to binding its distant territories together through communication. In the Guadalupe Mountains, traces of this historical episode remain visible to those who know where to look. The ruins of the Pinery Station stand as a testament to human determination, preserved within what is now Guadalupe Mountains National Park. Visitors can still walk portions of the original trail, imagining the rumble of approaching coaches and the clouds of dust that announce their arrival. The establishment of Guadalupe Mountains National Park in 1972 has helped preserve not only the natural splendor of the region, but also its cultural heritage. Park rangers and historians work to interpret the multi-layered stories of this landscape, from its geological origins to its significance for indigenous peoples to its role in westward expansion. Thank you for joining your desert frontiersman Alan for another Southwest story. Check out my large catalog of Southwest videos and playlists on historical tales, legends, lost gold stories, and adult bedtime stories. If you like a certain image from my videos, tell me in comments and give timestamp. Happy trails. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more great content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.